So it's interesting because the history of artificial intelligence, the trajectory of it, is not going to happen in our public spaces. You know, we see these images from Blade Runner all the time. We see this like this kind of post-human civilization, and it's always in the public space. It's happening already right now on our kitchen table. This is the Amazon, I don't know what they call it, Echo these days. They always put it next to a coffee machine. You know, they always put it in the kitchen, in our domestic sphere. And it's dressed in different ways. You know, it's almost approaching this kind of idea of human. You can wear different dresses. And there's some startling data. 39 million Americans own a smart speaker. That's 1 out of 6 of Americans. 65% can't imagine going back to the days before. 42% say that's essential to their lives. I mean, this is crazy. This is data from NPR. In 2022, more than half, 55% of all US households will have smart speakers. And more people are using it to control their homes for smart automation. So this is the Apple iPod, just iHome. No, what's it called? I don't even know. But anyway, this is the Amazon's competitor, Apple device. And what's interesting is they try to make it soft. They try to make it blend into the environment, like that it always belongs there. But inside, it's a supercomputer. Inside of that Amazon Echo, it's actually a machine. So dressing this up is very interesting. So our project is this. You might have seen the doll when you walk in. It's basically a smartphone. If you take apart a smartphone and put legs on it, it can be this kind of next generation AI. And I'll go into this a little bit more. So to make this AI, we have all the components, all the abilities all around the site near GDP. Here's GDP, and here's the Dongdaemun toy and stationery market. A lot of you know this. It's kind of a decrepit block. But we have Changshindong, which has a lot of fabric manufacturing. We have this traditional market, the largest traditional market in Seoul. Of course, we have retailers in Dongdaemun, but we also have electronics. So if you combine all these abilities, you could actually make amazing things. And it's a kind of untapped potential of the city. So here's some street views with the kind of the toy station market. Not very nice right now, but very dense. You also have really old Hanok from 1930s. But you have antique markets still selling Michael Jackson records in perfect condition right across the way. We have like the electronics markets in Seoul, but also the garment factories. So amazing abilities in this area. What if we can combine them? So this idea of combination comes from making this conveyor belt. You keep all the existing buildings. You keep all the manufacturing potential, but you put a conveyor belt so this whole block of micro factories and residences can act as one urban entity. So you have these individual entities, but you have potentially one large manufacturing system through this conveyor belt. And the way we located the conveyor belt is through historical lines. There used to be a stream that ran along this line that dumped into the Cheonggyecheon. There also used to be a railroad here. So the conveyor belt basically follows these lines and reconfigures them in a kind of urban regeneration project. So here's the old stream. It's been recovered into a new ecology. And through putting in this pedestrian system, then you can actually use these mixed-use buildings in a much more fluid way. You can use these residential buildings that are existing on site, the factories, but the conveyor belt runs through the back of house, and you can have this kind of customization happening in real time. These are just some potentials of the conveyor belt going through factories, going between buildings, going underneath mixed use, going inside storage containers. These are all existing buildings on this area. And so when around the south side where the railroad tracks were, we're actually proposing the conveyor belt to be covered over so that all these microfactories can work as one unit. And these are just some images. Here's that conveyor belt scooting through. But at the corner where it turns the corner, there's a new building and a parking lot, which could be a kind of design center, somewhere where the community can come together and really think about the future of this area. So it's very optimistic. But we also need a dark side. We always need a dark side to every story. This cartoon was actually most of the work was done by Payne Kim. Can you raise your hand? Payne Kim. She is She's going to recently or soon graduate from my lab. She graduated from SNU a couple years ago, last year. But she is pursuing her own trajectory, doing architectural illustration. So this, in a way, this is her debut tonight. So she did all these amazing drawings. But the story is very interesting. We used this cartoon to actually express this idea of Victorian stationery market, the essence of that area. But it tells a kind of narrative of the potential. So just to summarize the story, there's this kind of father. We don't know why he's a single father. Maybe the mother died. Maybe there's some other occasion. But he's distracted. He's one of these kind of genius fathers, and he's not very good at taking care of his daughter. But what's interesting is he cares about her a lot. So he tries more and more to kind of engage her in other ways and to take care of her in other ways. So he explores these areas and begins to put together this AI. I love that the phone is going off too. This is good. Thank you. Explore these areas and begin to assemble a kind of a doll that can begin to talk and begin to respond. But it's not enough. He's driven more and more and compelled more and more to give more and more sentience to this thing. So he ends up making this product, which her friends love. She loves this product. So he realized he's got to make more. Starts a business. He goes to local design offices. This is in Palais, right next door, but there's these design offices. He hires different skins. He makes different clothes for her. Goes to Seoul, interfaces with electronic markets, making parts. And this is a little ad that runs in the story. All of a sudden you have basically a home automation device that can walk around. It's a doll, made right, mass customized right on our site. But what it can do, once you add internet to it, it can be its own daycare. Through the TV, all the parents can interface. You can watch the kids. You know, this kid is telling its secrets. It also has sense of smell, so if there's a fire or if there's bad air, it protects from allergies. So it does all these things that are so great, and you know, has a kind of protecting role. But and also, of course, the businesses are skyrocketing in this area. You know, everyone wants this thing. There's a kind of handshake between the AI potential and human. There's this moment. And interesting enough, the star of the story, the main character, does a lecture, and these parents are talking and saying, "Well, do we need this? You know, safety is first." They check off the box. We've all checked off this box. Whenever we download an app, we basically sell our soul to the telecom company or whatever. It's saying, you can have my data, you can have me, basically. So everyone checks this box when they buy Daisy. It's called, what does Daisy stand for, Amy? Daycare Artificial Intelligence System. Whenever they buy this, it's a great name. She thought of this. So whenever they buy Daisy, they have to check off this box and say, yes, you can have my data. Imagine the incredible amount of data you get from raising your kids. And then so the last frame is a little bit dark. You see the president of this telecom company walking through these servers. She's looking over our site, and she's kind of mutters, "Everyone is safe tonight." You know, what does this mean? You know, is she controlling this data? So it's asking this question, even though we have incredible abilities of customization, even though we have a very optimistic urban proposal for the way things can become very locally manufactured. Once you hook into systems of data, does that locality disappear? That's the main question of this project. And interestingly enough, just for this last slide, this is the SK Telecom complex of buildings. Here's Seoul and here's our site over here. So in a way, our site not only has very local businesses, but it also has the kind of the corporate structure sort of potentially spying for us, maybe. So this question is the way we end this project. Thank you so much for listening. And,
all right, so thank you for coming and everybody for being here. So I wanted to give an introduction of the background for this project. My name is Rafael Luna. That's who had introduced me, and I'll be presenting the Seoul Production School. So the site being in Seoul. And basically to present this, I wanted to go over the background of what led to the interest in this project. There was recently this article, Bloomberg Technologies, that was entitled "The U.S. Drops Out of the Top 10 in Innovation Ranking," which, as a world news, I guess they used the U.S. dropping as a method to bring you into the article. But the interesting thing that goes unnoticed, it's not that the U.S. dropped out of 10, but we see South Korea as the #1, taking the top spot in the world as the most innovative country. Of course, this is based on Bloomberg Technologies, but it is very significant. And it's no surprise that South Korea has risen in innovation when it is a country that focuses on education as a background for building human capital. Recently, there's a book entitled "Why Countries Fail" by a British economist named James Robinson that explains basically the innovation comes from countries or cities or towns having inclusive economies as much as inclusive political systems. One of these inclusive systems that Korea, it's not just Seoul, but Korea thrives in is the educational system, which is a very strong social infrastructure for the country. Sadly enough, this same push for having a very educated human capital has pushed itself to be thrown out of the social infrastructure and have families seek private education over public education. So we start seeing these numbers drop, like elementary school, middle school, high school, from 4 million to 2 million students, they're still getting educated. They're just opting to go into a private system rather than the very strong public system that the government was providing. So it's a very strong social infrastructural network that it's somewhat becoming underutilized. And what does this pose as an urban artifact in the city? Well, if this is a system, I'm using as an example a block in Apgujeong as a typical example where these things occur. We start seeing, if we map out all the elementary schools and public schools, that yes, it is a system, it's social infrastructure, it's replicated certain radiuses around the different neighborhoods in order for everybody to have access to it. Some of these schools are actually starting to close because of the lack of student population. And if these are distributed throughout Seoul, that means that we'll eventually start having large urban voids. So what do we do with these large urban voids, and how can we maintain this very strong social infrastructure that we have as education? And then I think building up on what Nina was bringing up is, what is the future of education in the city? Do we still need these systems? Should it be more and more open way of learning? We all learn how to repair anything from YouTube, so do we even need institutions? So maybe these institutions can start changing and hybridizing in a way that we can start learning from production, learning from even AI, learning from all these online free platforms. So what I'm proposing that we look at is not knocking down these buildings, but actually through parasitic hybrids, we can start revamping them, injecting them with new programs so that we maintain this system, but as a system of the future learning. And I think of this as a life cycle that we can inject into these buildings, starting with the learning as a component for it. So we maintain the learning, but we need to kind of rethink what that means in these new systems. Again, free online education, open for anybody from a 1-year-old learning sign language to an adult as a continuing education. This could lead to teaching them about production and production on site so that you can become your own manufacturer. You can live on the site so that you always have access to all of these things. Then what happens with the things that you produce? You need to consume them, sell them, or buy them on site. You need spaces for organization, meaning how do you teach people to organize a business, form corporations, form alliances. Also socializing, how does meeting other people, events like these come into play in that factor of learning. And of course, exhibiting, getting the word out, exposing yourself to other people and cultures. This is not like 1, 2, 3, even though I number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It could go either way as long as we have a life cycle where all of these things operate and get transformed into architectural typologies that start creating a 3D block where you not only work at a ground level, but you start operating at certain or different vertical levels, and you start integrating them all in a block that gets infilled with this density of the life cycle. So we see the old structure being eaten up by these parasitic pods that are living units that get injected like a skewer that brings you into all of these social buildings and open up into different scales of urban plazas, again, to have the openness of not just people as residents to live in the block, but integrating the whole neighborhood. So in plan, you can see almost this being the cycle being interpreted as architecture as well, where you can walk through the whole building. And how do you manifest these forms of production and education into the public space? Maybe even the living pods can be part of this robotics that they get built up as you move into the block. The pods themselves, the way that we live, can start changing so that we can start being innovative and productive even when in our own homes. Of course, these are micro units. So how can you have these spaces where you have the freedom to always be thinking and trying out new things, and then after you're done, you still have your private space, and you're done for the day. I apologize that even though for a Korean living, he kept his shoes on. So we gotta redo that rendering. But again, from the micro unit to the large urban scale, the life cycle can continue where you have living and producing and learning all within again, from the multiple scales. Right. Thank you.
So it's my turn. As some of you guys know, I do things on Pyongyang, although I'm not from there. But for some reason, I've been doing this for some years. So we try to somewhat propose something related to this theme, Factory for Urban Living in Pyongyang as well. Not that I'm saying that I have a client there, but I wish. But hoping that one day when they open up more, when they open up the economy more to the market economy, probably there are ways that we can contribute to that nation. So it seems they're gonna talk, right? I'm not sure, but they say in May, but I'm still not sure. I know that some of you are bothered by these people. I'm sorry. I should have warned you that I have a photo of Trump. But whatever they do, and apparently it seems that there are gonna be some changes in this peninsula, and maybe that's what we're hoping, right? But in fact, the conception that we always had in this North Korea is that it's all about, I don't know, like problematic nation with all these military threats, or even some sort of outdated or far behind the average lives of other civilized countries. So So basically, that's something that we always have in mind when we think of North Korea. But in fact, things are changing, no matter whether the political system or the regime are changing, the actual society is changing, or it has been changed. So they started to adopt all these market economy systems. There are street vendors. There are big department stores which we haven't thought about seeing them in Pyongyang, right? So that's what's happening now. No matter whether we see it or not, it is happening. So that's somewhat the argument that I wanted to make. And aside from all these economic changes, we see all these new residential developments coming in. So if you think about this, I mean, obviously you can bring in your political point of view to this project, saying that, they built it because of whatever, to strengthen the idea of the regime or idea of their Juche ideology, whatever, but still it is happening. And the reason why I think they're happening is because there are more people that basically they do business with other countries such as China or some Southeastern Asia. So there are more people with money. And when you have more people with money in the nation, you basically have to fulfill their demand, right? So it's not about socialist, it's not about communist, it's about making those new middle class being satisfied with the regime, right? So that's what's happening. And when I see that, I felt a bit, disappointed, because they used to have a very interesting system called micro-district, which composes, or which becomes the main unit or basic unit to compose the city, right? So the micro-district, depending on the sizes of the city, micro-district is always the basic unit that forms the size of the neighborhood, and then it grows to the city. So that's what they had. And in fact, it is very similar to our 아파트 단지, right? We all know 아파트 단지, so it's not that hard to explain what this is about. So you have obviously residentials, but you have all these, let's say, childcare, schools, and civics, and let's say some service amenities or stores. You have all these things all together in one district, right? So that's what 아파트 단지 is, and also what micro-district is. The big difference is that they have factory or the production area in it. Because as you know, in the idea of socialism, everybody has to work on some sort of production. So in that sense, they try to embed all these either cottage industries or home workshops. They applied their idea into the district. Then so that made the whole economic system quite sustainable. So when this Mitsuhiro Mimura, who's the professional economist on North Korea, when he was asked that, there's been sanctions for a while on North Korea, but how could they survive throughout this sanction? And what he observed was that I'll just read the quote, 10 different families have 10 different ways of making money. For example, a wife has a talent for making clothes or cookies or cakes. She starts providing those services and products to people in her neighborhood. That household business starts at a very small scale, just selling to her neighborhoods individually, but through word of mouth, she gets more customers, her business grows. She needs help. Officially, she cannot hire the help she needs. Officially, that's forbidden. But if she works together with a group of wives in her building, that's acceptable. If one wife hires 9 others, that's illegal exploitation. But if 10 wives work together, that's socialist cooperation. So basically, this is the way how they sustain the neighborhood. Basically, they make things in local, and then they work in local, and then they sell it local. If you sell it to other city, that's illegal. But if you sell it to within the district, that's legal, and that's how they make the sustaining unit. So basically, this is the way how they start to bring in some ideas of market economy within this micro district. So it is quite interesting system, and it is interesting to develop further, considering what's happening in our society in these days. But the fact is, maybe North Korea itself doesn't know the pros or the advantages of this idea, and what they're doing is all these, let's say, new real estate type developments in the city. So they're not building any micro districts anymore. So they're building just high-rise towers with some commercials, but not with all these social amenities. So that's where our project has started. So the location of the project is there on the east side, where all the micro districts are, and on the left you see the Kim Il-sung Plaza with Im Daehaksdam, the Grand People's House, and you have Juche Tower. You see the shadow. So our side is over there, where it has been reconstructed mostly in the 60s. So as you can see, it's a mega block. It's almost 250 meter by 400 meters. So what they do have is that they have a residential at the perimeter of the block, and then another layers of residential inside, because it is quite a big block. But then there are small, let's say, workshops or the cottage factories in the middle. So we try to. By the way, I have to credit this work to Eugene, who's behind. She did a tremendous amount of work for this. So our idea is to make this kind of the physical module into our project, so it becomes more modular. So when we make a module within the block that could give us some flexibility when we have to deal with different sides of the blocks. So anyway, so that module is composed with residentials around and productions in the middle. So these are all different type of, let's say, module typologies with different production facilities. And this is how it's composed. You'll see in the exhibition. And this is how the unit works in different scales of the production. And eventually, in the last slide, eventually what we are thinking is that when they start to embed this idea in the area scale, the city scale, there can be relationship between these blocks that, okay, this block is mainly focusing on, let's say, fashion production, and the other block is mainly focused on the other production. So then they can kind of substitute each other or help each other, support each other. So that was the idea of the project. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lisa Hong from Taiwan, and my project is about Dadaocheng in Taipei. For those who are not familiar with Dadaocheng, that's Taipei in Taiwan, and this is like the map for the whole Taipei city. And the Dadaocheng area is where here the coast along the Danshui River, and Dadaocheng is the north part of it. And it was the oldest commercial area in Taiwan, in Taipei, and mainly for the beverage, for tea, and some Chinese herbs. And this is how it looked like before, and there was the temple within that area. And this is how it looks like now, because it was designated as a historic district in year 2000. So most of the old buildings are preserved, but somehow they are abandoned due to the inflexible urban regeneration regulations. So you can see in the map, this is the old street with all the historic buildings. And this is the fabric market. It was the street vendors, and the building was built in 1980s. So it's a big building and with some fabric markets inside. So it's on the second floor. There are all like textile and all the fabric-related materials. And on the fourth floor, you can see these like small stations that the ladies can sew the things you need with the fabric you buy downstairs. So they are like made-to-measure suits and things like that. And this is the temple we saw in the photo earlier. And you can see other supplies related to fabric production within this area. So this is where we propose our design. It's within the Dadochen district, but outside of the main historic street. So there are a lot of unused land like this. There are like four to five building lots. So we take them as a typical site and try to propose like a social living working units for them. So we started thinking how the fashion or fabric related work can do or can live together. So there are like different type of garments we wear now that's ready to wear or made to measure, and the highest level is the bespoke. So the ready to wear is what we buy today. It's mass production and it comes with different sizes, different styles, but you can customize it. And the second one is the made to measure suits. So it's like 30% custom made. They will take your they will take measure of your neck or your length of your arm or how your waist. But basically, you have to pick some typical type of style, and they are produced in the same factory as the ready-to-wear. And the highest level of suits is 100% custom-made. It's bespoke. Everything is it's designed for you, so you can customize everything. And what we propose here is made to wear. It's a bit like co-creation with the designers. They will make something that's they are designed by the designers, but you can pick the colors, pick the styles, and with the assistance of the 3D of the digital machines, you can have the different pattern making, and you can have made to wear garments. So that's how typical garment was made. First, you do the pattern making, and then you do the fabric dividing, and and then you do the sewing, overlapping, ironing, fitting, and finally the photo shooting. For these 3 steps, you need bigger space, a big table to do the patterns or dividing the fabrics and iron your products. And for these 2 steps, you can have individual stations, and you might need a private space to do your sewing and overlapping. And these two steps are back and forth. You need like more time there. And after that, you can go to a fitting room to try if the final garment is fit, and then do the photo shooting, and then go online or to the product catalog. So from the making progress, we are thinking maybe we can bring different kind of fashion-related workers into this building, using these three type of units. The first one is combine the residential, manufacturing, and the commercial. It's a bit similar to the street house in Dadaochen. So it's like a 2 or 3 floors house, and you have the first floor and second floor for commercial, and then you have your own studio on the second floor and the living space on top. Or you can have the second type. It's residential and manufacturing. It's for more like individual designers or some mature designers. They already have their own business. They can do their manufacturing here and then sell at some other place. Or just simply have the residential unit within the building. So for the whole condominium, we have 2 Unit A, which is the one similar to the street house. And 4 single suites for the individual designers that they already have their own business, or they are more like stylists. They can have their own, they can sell their product, or it's more like private service. And some apartment unit that's for for some innovative entrepreneur. They try to start up their new business together. And 6 single rooms for like graduate, just that new designer or a student just graduate from school. They want a space to live, but they can share the fashion factory together. So as you can see from the aerial view, that's the fabric market, and that's where our site is located. It's very close, and we can find a lot of similar sites within the Dadaochen area. So I think together we can move some of the workers in the market into our condominium, or the designer in the condominium can ask the worker in the market to do the production. So it will revive this area by injecting these individual projects. So this is the exploded isometric. You can see from the first floor, this green part, the yellow part, the first 3 levels are the street house. And in the middle, here, is the select shop for the young designer or the students just graduate from school. They can put their stuff here to sell. And 2 concept shops for the innovative.
This is a tally author from Beijing. This is Xiao Junbu and Yifan Zhang. And we have here's some projects from our office. This is the Qujing Museum in Yunnan Province, China. And this is Yinliang Stone Archive in Beijing. And Sports Center for University in Beijing.
Okay, this is the first time we address social issues as architects, and we got very excited to be invited by Zheng Wu. We would like to look closely into the migrant workers in Beijing and their life and their work. This is the place that has a big fire broke out last November, and after the fire, all the migrant workers got evicted based on fire safety issues. This is the area we would like to focus our study on. It's a village called P Village, and it's a village that the migrant workers, they actually have their own culture center, their own school, their own other facilities. So you can see the consciousness of the workers actually start to wake up in this kind of scenario, and that's what we want to tackle on in our project. This is the gate for P Village. These are all the exhibitions happen in P Village, the museum they build by themselves. And these are the library section in this village. These are actually a little production area, a little production workshop in the village. So after the eviction, a lot of artwork actually comes out to reflect upon the eviction and whether it's right or wrong and how does it impact the social life of modern China. So as architects, I think we should act. We should, try to imagine a new space for the workers to have them stay in the city and to give them a way for social mobility. So we would like to propose a heterotopia for the workers, and we work on 4 scales to tackle the issue. The first scale we work on is the interior scale. We generate all the furniture on the same floor matrix. So it would be the same floor, but based on the needs of the workers, the needs of the inhabitants, we have different layouts for furniture to satisfy the pragmatic needs of the living unit. And those are the floor plans. So this is the nano unit we call. The nano unit where the workers can stay. Usually in the traditional apartment layout, we have all the functional space layout horizontally. In here, we have them stacked up vertically. As the floor space folds and unfolds, it opens up different different spaces for the units. And between the units, whereas the interior of the units address the pragmatic needs of living there, the exterior actually address the cultural aspect of the community. So we have the in-between area there, where the white spots are for the communal space, the cultural space where workers can do museum, library, and other institutional activities. And as we can see, it would be a very flexible space. It's pretty much like a multi-functional space, interior or exterior, where people can join the space spontaneously, and they can reinvent the culture and urban syntax. As we can see here, we are trying to tackle on the difference between the machine age and the age of the AI. So as in our understanding, in the machine age, we have Euclidean geometry as the base of design, as the base of geometry. But as in the AI age, we have chaos theory for the base, for our mathematical base. So chance and chaos, probability, singularity are what we focus on here. We bring back the density and the chaos. The density and chaos are actually the drive that will generate urban context. So as we can see in here, we allow chaos and the nanoscale to come in to challenge what we have in the machine age. And this is the urban scale design. We have the 100-meter grid laid on top of P Village. And then we have our nanoscale like super block or super thin nano blocks or super thin nano towers in here. It's pretty much like the one song that Jerry Deleuze talked about. We are building up the city from the bottom up. We are check out the social hierarchy. There will be a new order for the urban context. Thank you.
I'm from Tokyo, so we look at Tokyo as a place for this project. Maybe you know, there's a story, Tokyo Story. It's a movie by director Ozu. It's taken in 1950s, and I thought it was a kind of nice introduction because as this grandpa looks kind of sad. There's this skyline in the back with all these chimneys, and that's kind of the area where our site is. It has been, this was 1950, but let's say it's almost 50, 60 years has turned, and now Tokyo, well, Japan to begin with, but then Tokyo is facing a very different situation from 50 years ago. In maybe 2 years, our population is going to decline. We have negative birth rates. 1 in 3 people are over 65 years old. Half the household will be singles in 2035, which is not that far. So if you're looking for your partner, it's a good place to look for, but a lot of people tends to choose being single. And the 11% of total housing are vacant. This is both because it's kind of overstocked, but it's also many houses are owned by those that are over 65 years old, so they don't. And then they're singles, they don't have much families to pass on the land, therefore it kind of remains there as being vacant wooden houses. So the questions we asked was how can we kind of use this opportunity, the idea of production, as a way to kind of address these issues, and how do we make it kind of into a positive thing that is right for the time. I don't know if you've been to Tokyo. This is the kind of central area of Tokyo. And our site is located a bit east side. We call it the kind of lower land of the city. And it has, for the last 100 years, throughout the modernizing process, it's been the industrial kind of zone. As you can see, the industrial zone, almost 100% people used to be working there and then living there. And slowly, of course, the productions went away from the city center, and therefore the factories owned by families are to be replaced by apartment buildings. And apartment buildings are mostly for the singles, and they are from outside the neighborhood. So often what happens is that the new people come, but they are not integrated in the city or the neighborhoods that were what used to be a tight community. This is a Sumida ward, the map, and it's a bit, you cannot see very well, maybe you can see it on the presentation. The zone that our site is located is in this semi-industrial area. This semi, it means it's not a heavy industrial, but what's interesting is that it's kind of allowed to build anything. If you see circles, it's almost all circle except for most hazardous. So in terms of potential future, this is a kind of really interesting place where it's no longer kind of having that early modernized zoning system. It's actually quite mixed in an exciting way. Around the site you can see the blue dots are the factories. That's kind of still remaining. And also the brown dots are the vacant houses. So what's happening is these factories are disappearing, but then they be replaced by new apartment building, while so many of these vacant houses are still around, not to be utilized. So our project site is one of the former factory sites, kind of right in the middle of these housing and the factories. It's kind of like this, the very dense wooden houses, and then within it you have, used to be a kind of old school factories, owned by families. This is of course a very generalized image, but then the factories used to go through many processes in producing products, which was shared among the neighbors' factories. What we see as a potential with this new technology, that it can produce a lot of customized products, but then also the weight on the production process becomes more towards how do you come up with the idea, how do you come up with the what to make more than how to make. And so we see more of the factory production as that process more than just the act of producing. And we see that as something that we can overlap between housing and the factory, if you consider that practice. And this is because as the singles come into the apartment, they stay inside their rooms, they don't associate. We think those are the precise same kind of programs that's missing for them, is what's probably going to be important for the new production process. I stress this kind of single population because our site is also one of the highest rated lonely death. It's basically because the singles undiscovered by any relatives, and it becomes a very big issue. And so our project provides a kind of space. We made it design, and the design doesn't really matter actually, but in a way we made it obvious so that it kind of has a factory with spaces for production, but then there are more for the workers and the singles to kind of live, uses these spaces as a way of talking or sharing ideas and so on. And then not only that it remains within the factory, but then the fact that these singles meet the neighbors who come there to share. I forgot to mention, but in this factory we said, okay, we're going to make a factory for building elements, like a staircase, windows, doors. These are the elements that we don't really focus so much, but I think with these production possibilities we can kind of say, pimp up your house, which you don't really think usually, but we think that house makers are kind of a bit too boring. We have empty houses, let's pimp up the house with these kind of technology. And through that, the neighbors can come there to order something, they can discuss. The other factor, the existing factory owners can come there and meet. And then allows for such interactions. If you look around the neighbors, there are some of the house factory buildings. And because they can make things, they just kind of do things. I'm sure they are mostly illegal, but somehow they manage to do so. And so we see it kind of as a potential. What if you actually design this? What if you actually allow for customized elements to be attached? And so that's the kind of elements. Our proposal is we have our factory also customized with such things, just almost as a showroom. And then what this factory produces can then be implemented into vacant houses and neighbors around it, through which eventually if the vacant house becomes nice, then the singles who live there can eventually move out of this factory, move into these neighbors, welcoming another kind of newcomers. So that's it. Thank you.